So there's a huge governor's race in California, and it's pretty interesting what's going on. You know, there's a Sheriff Bianco from Riverside is running, and I got to tell you, I hope he wins. He's an excellent choice. I hope he's the next governor of California. He's extremely pro Second Amendment, but I'm here to tell you there is only one path to victory for Sheriff Bianco to be the next governor. Only one path. I don't mean that this is the preferred path or maybe, or there's another path. This is more, I mean, there's only one path for him to win. And it's a bit of a long shot, but it's completely and totally doable. But it's only doable if people really truly concentrate on the plan, on what needs to actually happen. And, you know, for those who are going to watch this and be unhappy with the fact that I'm saying, hey, he's only got one shot or he's only got one path to victory, you know, that I'm somehow not supportive of enough of Bianco, nothing could be further from the truth. I got to tell you, Gun Owners Radio has been supportive of Sheriff Bianco from not day one, but before day one. When he started running for sheriff back in Riverside against an incumbent, we were fully supportive of Bianco against the incumbent. The incumbent was somebody who wouldn't issue CCWs, and we were very excited about Bianco running against him. It was a long shot, but he won, and we were extremely happy. And I mean, we were happy when, meanwhile, you know, the old crew for NRA was backing the incumbent who wouldn't issue CCWs. CRPA was backing the incumbent who wouldn't issue CCWs. And, you know, FPC was excited about Bianco. We were excited about Bianco. You know, when we first started Inland Empire Gun Owners in Riverside at the very first meeting, we had Sheriff Bianco come out. He was newly elected, and we gave him an award for his, you know, everything he'd done to turn around the CCW situation in Riverside. Big fans there. During the BLM riots, when he got criticism from a very small group of people who didn't like the way he handled the BLM riots, we were there and said, hey, no, he's doing the right thing. You don't know what you're talking about. And then after there was an arrest at a Trump rally in Riverside, and Bianco was taking criticism from people outside of the state who didn't understand the situation, who didn't understand Bianco, we immediately got him on air and said, hey, we need you to explain yourself. We need people to see what we know of you. We understand that it's easy for people to look at California and say, hey, I'm sure there's just an anti-gun sheriff, but that's not the case with Bianco. In fact, I want to play just a little bit from that interview. I've heard and read, and I don't know what's accurate, that he had a fake ID and a fake license.
Yeah. So I will tell you everything that the deputy saw and the deputy heard and the deputy making that arrest. So this goes back to the event was not a very secure event. It was basically in a field, in a farm.
So we immediately got him on the air and gave him as much time as he needed to explain who he was, where he stood on Second Amendment. We've been fans for a long time. In fact, he's endorsed by Orange County Gun Owners. He's endorsed by Inland Empire Gun Owners. He's on their voter guide. So the idea that, I mean, we clearly support Chad Bianco for sheriff. We want him to win for sheriff. Now let's talk about there's really only one path for victory, and I want to start with some numbers. I want to start with some facts here. The first is I want you to look at the 2022 results for governor. Let's pull that up on the screen. If you look, there was a guy named Brian Dahl. He ran as the Republican, and of course he ran against everybody's favorite, Gavin Newsom. And if you look, Dahl got 40% of the vote. Gavin Newsom got 59% of the vote. Okay, so that's 40% to 59%. Okay, now if you look, let's just go back one more. If you look at the 2018 election, that was a guy named John Cox. He ran as the Republican, and then Gavin Newsom ran, obviously, as the Democrat. And Cox was even more popular than Dahl. Cox actually ran a little bit better race, frankly, in my opinion, than Dahl, but still only got 38% of the vote. So Newsom got 61%, almost 62%. And Cox got 38% of the vote. Okay, so let's just looking at the lay of the land. Now let's look at the 2024 presidential election just in California. Okay, so Kamala Harris, 58%, 58.5%. Trump only got 38% of the vote in California. Okay, so what about when Trump ran against Biden? So let's look at the 2020 election. Trump got 34% of the vote and Biden got 63% of the vote. So why am I going into all this? Why am I showing you these numbers? Why is it important? Well, I want to show you overwhelmingly how Californians vote. I want to show you the math. Math doesn't lie. And I know we're all excited about Bianco. I know that it's easy to get emotional, but I want to take a step back and really look at this math. Now, one of the most convincing pieces of math is look at Prop 50. So Prop 50 was a disaster for the Republicans. The yes votes buried the no votes, 64% to 35%. And they actually positioned this as an anti-Trump vote. The Democrats basically said, hey, we need to get back at Trump. That's your motivation for voting, and ended up getting 64%. Now, on all of these, you're welcome to make the argument that, oh, well, polls aren't accurate, or red wave, or, it's different this time, or, whatever you want to do. And I've heard it all before. But the reality is, the reason I wanted to show you the presidential race, the governor's race, and Prop 50 over not just one election cycle, but over the last couple of election cycles, is to show you that the math is really, really similar. So what's the path to victory for Bianco? Because there is only one. The only path to victory for Bianco is actually based on the fact that California does elections so differently. In the primary, it's the top two vote getters that get to go to the general election. It doesn't matter if those two vote getters are Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, decline to state. It doesn't matter what their party affiliation is. In most other states, they take the top vote getter who is a Republican and they take the top vote getter who is a Democrat, and those two run against each other. But in our system, in California, they changed it a few years ago, so it doesn't matter party affiliation. So you could have two Republicans running against each other. You could have two Democrats running against each other. The one and only path to victory for Bianco is if there are two Republicans in the race going into the general. That's it. If there is a single Democrat that makes it into the general election, the math is, it's impossible for a Republican to win governor in California, no matter how emotional you get over it. No matter how much you want it, it's mathematically impossible for a Republican to beat a Democrat in the general. So now let's take a look at the current polling. This is KTLA put this out, and they have they've paged down a little bit, they have most of the candidates there. And you'll look to see there that Chad Bianco is in first place with 13%. And then you have Swalwell, who just jumped into the race, extremely anti-gun. He's at 12%. There's a chart, if you page down a little bit further. There it is. Okay, so you have Steve Hilton, who's the other Republican. Steve Hilton's at 12%, and Katie Porter's at 11%. Viller, I always get his name wrong. He's at 5%. Tom Steyer, who just jumped in, is at 4%. So is it even possible? Now, there's a lot of undecideds here. So these numbers are particularly low. A lot of these undecideds are they're going to vote for somebody eventually, right? So what the goal here is to have enough people run as Democrats, as viable Democrats, to dilute the vote so that Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco are the two people that make it to the runoff. And frankly, all they would have to do is get to about 20% each, maybe 22%, just to be on the safe side. But if they both get to 20, 22%, and not a single Democrat breaks 20%, then you have two Republicans going into the runoff. You have 2 Republicans going into the general, and that gives Chad Bianco a chance to win. Now, I've talked to Chad Bianco a lot over the years. I've talked to Steve Hilton. You know, Steve understands the concerns of Second Amendment folks. He certainly is an anti-gun, but there's no way he's going to put the emphasis on Second Amendment and CCW reform that Bianco will. But still, Steve Hilton is, you know, head and shoulders above any of these Democrats that are running. So the only hope for governor is to not steal votes from the other Republican to give to Sheriff Bianco. The only hope is to get enough Republicans out to vote so that they vote for either of the Republicans and get them both into the runoff. Otherwise, there's absolutely no chance that a Republican, if it were either of the Republicans against any of the Democrats, they'll be lucky to clear 40%. And how do I know that? All the math that we just showed you over the last however many years. So that's it. That's what Republicans have to work on, is getting more Republicans to show up in the June primary so that you have 2 Republicans running in the general. And a lot of people are going to get all twisted up about that. And they're going, oh, no, it's different this time. You know, I just know, I can feel it in my heart of hearts that it's just different. People are changing. Red wave. You know, just look at the way things have changed. Trump is changing minds and hearts. Good luck.
No, he's not.
Good luck. You need more than passion. You need more than emotion. You have to have strategy. And the only strategy that's going to work here is to get both Republicans into the general. Otherwise, it's a completely and totally lost cause. What do you guys think about that?
I agree. Go ahead.
I'm just trying. It's hard. Is my mindset, my thoughts are different than the rest of the state of California. So I'm trying to take myself out of my own mind and to put myself in
Right.
into the mindset of the rest of California, framing around like what you're seeing. So it's taken me a minute to kind of process through some information.
What do you mean? What's the difference in the mindset?
Well, I obviously come from a more conservative background. I'm Second Amendment. I'm conservative in pretty much every way, and I know that enough of our state is not. And so I'm just trying to think from the viewpoint, kind of try to almost like devil's advocate, trying to play from the other side. If I were someone from the other side that thinks differently than someone that is not going to want Bianco, kind of trying to think about it from the perspective of someone that's going to be in that mindset. What would put me in a place?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's what I'm just trying to process that.
Obviously, we want the average Californian to vote for Bianco.
Right.
That's what we want.
Right.
But the reality is the average Californian is going to vote for one of the Democrats.
Right.
So split the hell out of the Democrat vote.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope 2 or 3 more viable Democrats jump in
Yeah.
and water
Divide
it
the
down. Yeah.
I agree. I think one of the things that's so difficult for me when we talk about like political issues like this is that the voter turnout is so freaking low. It's embarrassingly low. 2018 in the gubernatorial election, I think it was like 64%. 2022, like 50% of registered eligible voters actually voted. So there's all sorts of studies and stuff that show like, okay, we think this percentage of those non-voters were Democrats. We think this percentage was Republican. But at the end of the day, like unless conservatives or people who want somebody like Bianco to get elected are giving an immense amount of peer pressure to everybody that they know to vote, we're not going to see those numbers increase. Presidential elections get a bigger turnout because which is funny to me. People think that the presidential election impacts their life so much more. We live in California.
Right.
Governor impacts a lot of our like day-to-day expenses, things like gas taxes and all of that. That's all state level. That's not federal level. I know federal level impacts a lot of people, but if you really want change in your state, if you want to feel a difference, get more involved in your state's politics.
Get involved, but then also, so what's the tactic that I'm even describing? Like, what are you saying, Mike? If we need 2 Republicans, how do we maneuver that? Well, you maneuver that by you get as many Republicans to just go out and vote for a Republican as you can. You don't necessarily, you've heard, C's get degrees, right? If you got a B or an A, you study too hard. If Bianco gets 30% and Steve Hilton gets 15% and some other Democrat gets 16%, the Democrat's going to win.
Right.
So, both, Hilton and Bianco, they need to get about 20, 22% each. It doesn't help anything for either of them to get to 25, 30, 40%.
Right.
It doesn't help. Now, I got to tell you, I said 40%. If either of them were polling at 40% right now,
it would be a totally different conversation.
Totally different conversation. Yeah. But the fact is they aren't. And even
they won't.
And they won't. And even if those undecided folks, were jumped into this poll, they wouldn't get either of those guys up to 40%. So the idea now is to not attack Steve Hilton, not attack Bianco. The idea now is that every Republican needs to get every Republican to show up and vote for a Republican in the governor's race. That's the tactic. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of have to cross your fingers and hope that, that they, the top two vote getters are Republican. Because again, the math, there is nobody out there who really understands what they're talking about thinks that a Republican can win against a Democrat for governor in the state of California.
No.
And that isn't meant to demotivate you as a voter. That's meant to motivate you. Look, there's a chance, there's a strategy, there's something you can do, and here it is.
But taking it further, we get two Republicans in.
Yep.
The tax steps change because then we need to split it and take it the angle of Bianco. But the first step to get there, you're right, is to get two Republicans in.
If we get two Republicans in June, then we'll, cross that bridge when we get there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And that's where I was already putting my head as I was trying to think it through that point. But yeah, you're right. Let's take baby steps.
It is. But the other thing is, like I said, I've frequently described Sheriff Bianco as my favorite elected official. Mm-hmm. That I've ever met. And I've met a lot of elected officials, and he does an outstanding job in so many different ways. But even if he does lose to Steve Hilton, who I've talked to on the phone, we've had an actual conversation about his race since he jumped in, is still head and shoulders above anyone else who's running, second only to Chad Bianco. And I don't know, even if it's a distant second, he's, still. So even if you're worried, like, well, gee, if Steve Hilton gets in, the sky's falling. No, not necessarily, I think that people would be happy with Steve Hilton if Chad Bianco weren't running.
Right.
Yeah.
But both Republicans are viable, which is highly unusual.
Very unusual.
Usually there's one that's barely viable, and then everyone else is way distant.
Yes.
So you have two really, truly viable Republicans who generally agree with what Republicans agree with, and boom, you got a strategy. So there it is. One way to victory for Chad Bianco, and that's to have him run against another Republican. So the idea is, if your Republican Party, your local Republican Party in your county isn't doing anything or isn't doing enough to get Republicans to turn up and vote, then you need to take the bull by the horns and motivate them, because that's the only chance of victory we got.
Yep.
So there you go. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media, and check out our website at gunownersradio.com.